WALL-E just might be Pixar's most powerful film, and that's saying something for a studio that's won over 18 Academy Awards. I feel like WALL-E is a largely forgotten about film that gets lost in Pixar's catalog of other movies like Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Up. And that's a shame because I really think that WALL-E might just be the most powerful Pixar movie that this studio has ever created. In this video, I'll break down why. Number one, it deals with very important topics. Let me ask you a question. How many animated movies have been focused on the apocalypse? I had to look it up. Apparently, there's only one other animated film that's ever been about the apocalypse, a PG-13 movie called 9, with voice acting provided by Elijah Wood, John C. Reilly, and Jennifer Connelly. The thing is, that movie came out in 2009, whereas WALL-E came out in 2008. And it was actually ideated for the first time in 1994 over a dinner that Andrew Stanton had with John Lasseter, Joe Ranft, and Pete Docter. Andrew Stanton directed this film. He also directed Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, along with co-wrote Toy Story, A Bug's Life, and Toy Story 2. In short, Andrew was and is a creative master, and I think that this movie, WALL-E, might just be his masterpiece. The original idea for WALL-E came about with Andrew's simple question of, what if mankind had to leave Earth and somebody forgot to turn off the last robot? They liked the idea of WALL-E being a trash collector to make him more sympathetic to the audience, and Andrew also liked the imagery of stacked pieces of garbage, stacked higher than, skyscrapers. He did not find the idea dark because having large skyscrapers of trash was kind of like a childish image of the apocalypse for him. WALL-E, surprisingly, doesn't make you feel like complete crap when you're watching it. Sure, it's depressing to see what Earth has become, but the film wraps us up in a nice love story between robots before we can stop and think about what's happening. And the discovery of the plant gives us hope that possibly the Earth can be habited again. Still, we can't get away from the fact that this movie is about how humans trashed the planet and caused it to become uninhabitable. And the film decides to give us very definitive answers for why this happened. It's clear that B&L, a ginormous corporation that even took over governing the Earth's inhabitants, was the cause for all this. We see B&L money, B&L shopping centers, B&L banks, B&L gas stations, and B&L cruise liners. Consumerism is the culprit here, and I gotta hand it to this film. That's pretty deep to put into a kid's movie. I watched WALL-E in 9th grade, and a lot of this stuff just flew over my head when I watched it for the first time. But at the same time, it didn't. Subconsciously, I got the message that humans, through mass production and overpopulation, caused the Earth to become uninhabitable. Pixar always does a good job of making their movies for kids while including a bunch of jokes that the adults in the audience will find funny. But watching this movie again at age 29 was eye-opening for me. WALL-E, for the first time in Pixar's history, really packed a philosophical punch for everybody in the audience. The Incredibles and Finding Nemo had older characters for the adults in the audience to relate to, but deep questions about consumerism, overpopulation, big corporations, artificial intelligence, the end of the world, and sedentary lifestyles were never touched by Pixar or any animated studio before. In a word, the grown-ups must have been floored to see all of these ideas being presented on screen in a kid's movie. And dare I say it, WALL-E might just be the first Pixar movie and only Pixar movie to impact the kids and the adults equally. WALL-E remains the only Pixar movie to talk about perhaps the biggest problem of a generation, which is climate change. And they do it effectively. WALL-E has a 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It is certified fresh. And it even topped Time's list of best movies of the decade. Number 1. It was number 1. For that alone, it's probably the most important movie that Pixar has ever made. Number 2, WALL-E was way ahead of its time. WALL-E doesn't stop at overpopulation and consumerism. It continues in its second act, exploring topics like obesity, sedentary lifestyles, artificial intelligence, and screen addiction. What's wild to me is that WALL-E came out in 2008, and the first iPhone came out in 2007. WALL-E was obviously written and conceived in the 1990s and early 2000s, so it didn't really have time to digest the implication of what smartphones could do to the human race. This film was written without any knowledge of how smartphones would then go on to affect everybody. Many times in this movie, we see humans so enthralled with their screens that they don't even realize they have a pool on board. They're just completely disconnected from what's happening around them, kind of like what happens when we have our cell phones out all the time. In one scene, a guy doesn't even realize that he's video calling with somebody who's literally right next to him. Obviously, we have an obesity problem in the United States, but this movie wasn't meant to be a commentary on obesity specifically. James Hicks, a physiologist, mentioned to Andrew Stanton the concept of atrophy and the effects prolonged weightlessness would have on humans living in space for an extended period of time. So Stanton worked that into the script. It just so happens that, with the benefit of age, Wall-E prophetically described exactly where the human race would go in the future. Wall-E is basically 15 years old now. We have to understand, too, that Twitter was created in 2006. And by the time Twitter was even founded, Wall-E was already well underway on production and had its story ironed out. It takes years to make an animated film. So somehow, with the benefit of age, this film actually became more powerful. I did a video on how The Matrix, an already powerful film, has only gotten more prophetic with age. This movie's basically a quarter of a century old. I've linked that in the description as well. Thing is, movies don't typically age that well. Looking back on Snow White through a 2023 lens, for instance, makes some of the ideas in that movie look really dated, right? Disney's been known to place warnings at the beginning of its films stating, "This movie might contain outdated cultural depictions." Pixar even retconned The Incredibles a little bit, making Elastigirl the breadwinner of the family and turning Bob Parr into a stay-at-home dad. You can tell that Elastigirl's character, someone who's able to stretch and bend and make ends meet, is just a metaphor for the stereotype of being an overworked mom back in 2004. But with the benefit of progress in time, it's clear the creators set out to put very different messages into the sequel about gender roles and almost retcon what came before. Wall-E doesn't need to do any of that. It's aged like a fine wine. It's actually gotten more impactful with time. The creators, purposefully or not, created a movie that seemed to tell the future back in 2008 before smartphones, social media, algorithms, and even artificial intelligence took over our lives. It's hard to watch this film in 2023 without being blown away by how much I see humanity in these characters. Completely lost in technology, inactive, bored, and disconnected from reality. That's us, and it started happening with the advent of the smartphone, something that really took hold in our society and culture after Wall-E came out in 2008. Number 3, this movie does so much with so little dialogue. Here's a fun fact. Wall-E was largely left undeveloped in the 90s because Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton thought that a compelling movie couldn't be made with a robot main character. Besides Wall-E, Pixar has never made a movie about main characters that literally couldn't talk. That makes this film so much more awe-inspiring to me. For that reason, so much of the emotion needs to be shown through body language for these robot characters. How Pixar made a better love story than 95% of romance movies with characters that can't even actually talk is beyond me. I just wanted to highlight that really fast. And number 4, what came after Wall-E for Pixar? To cement Wall-E as the most important movie Pixar has ever made, we have to take a look at the movies that Pixar released after Wall-E. I'm just going to name the ones that I thought were actually good. You got Coco, Up, Toy Story 3, Brave, Soul, and Luca. Everything else was mid or bad. I'm looking at you, Lightyear. Up is my favorite Pixar movie. Coco is brilliant on so many levels. I have a lot of love for the rest of the movies that I just mentioned, but I still don't think they can touch Wall-E in terms of importance. The only one that might be able to compete is Soul, the first Pixar movie that deals with spirituality, death, and, souls. I love Soul. I think there's a legitimate argument that Soul might take the cake for the most important Pixar movie ever made, but for me, it's still Wall-E. Soul, like so many other Pixar movies, centers on how to live a better life. Wall-E does the same thing, while simultaneously commenting on perhaps the biggest problem of a generation, which is climate change. And they wrap all of this up into one of the greatest love stories ever told, centering on a relationship between two robots. For all those reasons, I don't think there will ever be another animated movie as impactful as Wall-E. and it's my pick for the most powerful movie in Pixar's history. Hey everyone, if you like that video, please subscribe to my Substack. I have a written version of this video there. I also have written versions of other film breakdowns that I've done. We have about like 8 or 9 of them there so far. It's really cool. It's free to sign up. It's free to join. The link is down below in the description. I hope that you check it out. Also, if you like this video, please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to get more film reviews and breakdowns in the future, and let me know what you think of WALL-E and Pixar in general down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.